Hey guys, it's the Chatty Goose here. I just turned 30 years old, and this is a video me talking about what I would do if I could start over again at 20. First, I'd like to say I wish I took life a little more seriously when I was in my 20s. I really only cared about what was happening in the moment, not about what was going to happen 10, 15, 20 years down the road. Of course, 10 years later, I'm in a much different place. I take my finances, my retirement, my career, my relationships much more seriously. When I was just 20 years old, I got in a pretty serious relationship at the time that was very toxic. In the resulting 3 years of that relationship, I paid a lot of bills and bought that person a lot of things. Didn't really care how that was affecting me financially. I would definitely, that's definitely one of my biggest regrets in my life, especially in my early 20s. It really held me back for a very long time, set me back in life as well. Um, I, if you're 20 years old, your first relationship, super serious, take a step back, think about, how it's affecting your life in a day to day, and if you could really see yourself being with that person, 10, 15, 20 years down the road, marrying them. That's definitely not something I saw with that person. I just, was there because I didn't want to be lonely, didn't want to be single, definitely my own selfish reasons as well. Um, and eventually, we broke up, and I went on to be single for a couple of years and realized it's not that bad. Actually, very much enjoyed being single, and eventually found the person that I will spend the rest of my life with, and ended up being very happy in my current relationship and not seeing my life without them. Couldn't imagine my life without my current girlfriend, and you know, eventually built up my finances. Being single is much easier. I felt like I could save a little bit more, start focusing a little bit more on my investing and stuff like that. Um, Secondly, the second thing I would change in my 20s would have been, my spending habits, my investing habits. When I was 20, I didn't really care. I had a pretty decent job in my early 20s. I hated it, but I made pretty good money, and never really saved, never really invested, just bought material things, bought a nice car, wasted a lot of money on a monthly um, payment instead of putting away money in my early 20s that could have turned into much more, in my 30s and 40s with compound interest. But instead, I just cared about living in the moment, buying nice things, looking cool on Instagram and Snapchat instead of, setting myself up financially for the future. And as I went farther into my 20s, I, started to realize that a little bit more, and, backed off, sold some things, um, bought property, bought, um, built a cheap house that I own outright. So, and now definitely focus more on my finances and investing than I did in my early 20s, and trying to set myself up for an early retirement, and being able to be happier later on in life. And I would definitely, go back and tell myself, dude, just save some money, invest some money, max out your Roth every year. You'll set yourself up for really good stuff, 10 years down the line. And, half those things you bought, you use them once, twice, you use them for a year, and then you put them away and never think about them again. Um, so I would definitely change that. And then the last thing I would change in my 20s, if I could go back, was it's definitely my career path. So I worked 6 years at a job that I really hated, um, a local business in my area that, um, you know, definitely is the main workforce in the area, but I hated it. I hated it for all 6 years. I did it because I thought I would retire from there, make a good pension, and just stick it out and suck it up for 25, 30 years. But it really weighed on my mental health more and more every year. Finally, I quit and didn't know what I was going to do. Tried a couple of different jobs. It eventually led me to the job I'm at now. I never thought I could really make as much money at another job. I never thought I could excel in another job. I always thought I was, stuck in this niche corner of having to work for this business and getting a pension and just, doing status quo in my area. But it turns out, I left my job, tried a couple of other jobs along the way that I didn't really enjoy either, and then found a job in sales where now I have, excelled and am really starting to do well. I make more money now than I did ever for that other job. I'm able to, put a ton of money in my 401k, max out my Roth, and really be in a good spot in life. But of course, it took me 10 years to realize that you can actually, explore some other options, and it's not just your first career that you have to choose, kind of try to figure out where you're going to be in life. And, when you're 20, you just care about kind of making money and doing, as much as possible and having a lot of freedom as well. And although I had a job that used to give me a lot of time off and a lot of freedom, when I was at that job, I hated it. And I finally decided I'd rather work at a job more and get less time off, and actually enjoy the job than hate work and hate my life and be in a bad mental space, um, for sure. So it's not about making the most money or being, in a comfy spot. It's getting out of your comfort zone, learning new things, trying new fields. Even if you got to take night classes, kind of move on and try to do some different things. It's can really help you and set you up in the future to be in a better headspace and, you know, do better for your family and for your friends. And this new job has really set me up to enjoy life a lot more and actually enjoy going to work every day, even though it is, 6 days a week, 5 days a week. I enjoy it a lot more than having to go into work 2, 3 times a week, work 16 hours, and not be very happy in life. And this job is also, with all that time off that I used to have, I used to spend way more. And now that I work a little bit more and I work every day, I don't have full days off, um, for 3 or 4 of them a week to spend money all day and try to figure out, oh, what am I going to do with my free time today? No, I go to work, I go to the gym, I go to work, and then I go home, hang out with my significant other. I'm not, going on these trips every day, spending hundreds of dollars. Um, and, I max out my 401k, I max out my Roth, and I'm putting myself in a much better spot for my future when I'm 40 years old. Hopefully, I will have my retirement built much, much higher, be closer to retirement age than what I set myself up in my 30s from my 20s. I put very little in. I put actually most of my money into my retirement the last 2 years, um, instead of, focusing on it the prior 8 years that I was making almost six figures. So, it's not about what you guys do in your early 20s. It's about building yourself and setting yourself up for success in your later years in life so you don't have to work until you're 60, 70 years old. I come from a family where no one has ever really set themselves up for that. And I'm trying to, do better and change that pattern, make it so my kids, also see that and can do something with their life and realize that, they can go to school, pick the job they want. They don't have to live in the same town. They can move away, things of that nature. But thank you guys for listening to my rant. Um, leave a Please subscribe if you liked listening. Give me a like, it helps out a lot. I hope you guys have a great day.